Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. How's everybody doing today? I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. I hope you do something today that encourages you to be a little happier. So figure out what that is and then do it. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying home. And together we can help win the war on coronavirus. For today's Critter Chat, we're going to talk about one of those animals that I didn't know about much at all for a very long time. And then I learned a little more about them. I instantly was drawn toward them because I think they're very cute. And then I had the chance to work with them, and my appreciation and love for them went through the roof. So today we're going to talk about an animal called the takin. Now, very few people have heard of a takin. Very few people have seen a takin, with some exceptions. So there are some zoos in the US that have had takin for a while, and sometimes people who visit those zoos have seen them. But until then, you maybe have never seen or heard of them prior to that. The first time I saw takin were at the San Diego Zoo. I was an adult before I ever saw or heard of them. San Diego Zoo was the first zoo in the US to have them, and I think they were pretty rare at other zoos until the last probably 10 years or so. Not a lot of zoos have them. San Diego Zoo describes takins as with horns like a wildebeest, a nose like a moose, a tail like a bear, and a body like a bison. The takin truly looks like a character from Dr. Seuss. I think that's a pretty good description. All of those body parts kind of check out to their comparison. Their horns are pretty odd for an animal their size, and for the shape of their horns. Their moose-like nose is very true. They have a huge nose, really, really big nostrils on the edge of their nose. And they also, not in that description, they have really big floppy lips, which is kind of fun. It helps them to eat some of their food. They kind of use their lips to kind of help pull branches down closer to their mouth. They can kind of stick their lips out and grab with their lips a little bit more. In a zoo setting, it's one of my favorite things about them was when you could get close enough and they were willing to let you feed them by hand to kind of play with their lips a little bit. Incidentally, the San Diego Zoo and their description as a Dr. Seuss character, whether you know this or not, Dr. Seuss actually donated a ton of money to conservation organizations and to zoos. So he is a huge champion for conservation and did a lot of funding through zoos. He was also a resident of San Diego, California, and gave a lot to the San Diego Zoo during his lifetime, and his estate still continues to do that to this day. So he's kind of a little subtle conservation hero in that he didn't want his big Dr. Seuss name used on a lot of his conservation donation work. But it's a different side story. Let's talk a little bit about takins. So first of all, they are large animals. They typically stand between 3, maybe down here, and 4.5 feet tall at the shoulder, with a very large head that is often higher than that. So even the female takin, their heads are probably up to here. Male takin sometimes up to here. And because of their athletic and muscular bodies, they can stand on their hind legs and put their front legs on something very tall. And they can reach very, very high up into the trees that they feed on. There are 4 subspecies of takin. Those are called the golden takin, which is very, very lightly colored, almost a white or very bright yellow. The Mishmi takin, which are very small, very dark colored. They're the smallest of the takin that I'm aware of. The Bhutan takin, which I don't know much about, And I have never seen those. I have seen the other three in zoos. And the Sichuan takin. If you see a takin in the U.S., it's going to be a Sichuan takin. Those are the takin that are in the United States. In zoos. They're not out, they're wild. For takin, like I said, they can be between 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall at the shoulder. Females top out around 600 pounds. Males can reach almost 800 pounds. So very, very large animals. They're between 5 and 7 feet in length, so they can be very big. And they have kind of some really gnarly looking horns that come off. Both females and males have them. The males also kind of have like a little horny patch in between the two horns. And depending on the individual, those horns can be very sharp and pretty thick. They're not super long, but they are very definitely some weapons that they can use to defend themselves. Takin are for sure built for a mountainous life. So they live in the mountains of Asia, particularly portions of the Himalayas, and then up through some of the highlands and mountainous regions in through central China. Over those mountainous areas, they live in 4 different countries. So that would be China, the country of Bhutan, which is a very small country right between India and China. India, they live a little bit in India where it borders the Himalayas. And the country of Myanmar, which used to be called Burma. You may have heard it by either name, although they've gone by the country name of Myanmar for about 50 years or so. In their mountainous home, they live at pretty high elevation, so about 4,000 feet up to about 12,000 feet in elevation. And the takin don't always stay up high at 12,000 feet. During the winter, they come lower to help them still be able to find food. It does snow in most of those areas, so they would kind of move further down the mountains as the snow comes in, and then back up high in the summer. They have a very stocky, muscular body. They have a very shaggy coat, lots of big, thick hair. They kind of shed that in the springtime, and then it's kind of soft and fuzzy for a couple months during the summer, and then grows out longer to keep them warmer during the winter time. Interestingly enough, if you've ever heard of the Greek myth of Jason and the Argonauts, or Jason and the Golden Fleece, many people believe that that myth derived from this very special sheepskin that was gold in color. There's different adaptations of the story and where it came from and what it meant and where it was going and if it was true or if it was not. But a lot of historians believe that it possibly was the fleece or skin of a golden takin. They are definitely a color that would match up with that. And they kind of have a very sheep-like feel to their hair because sheep are actually one of their closest relatives. So they're in this very big family of animals called the Bovidae. That includes things like cows, goats, sheep, antelopes, giraffes, all sorts of deer, and all sorts of many, many different types of animals. Takin, although they kind of were grouped as possibly being most like the muskox of the polar Arctic regions, newer DNA evidence shows that they're more closely related to some of the mountain sheep that live in the mountainous areas of different parts of the world. But takin are still kind of confusing by science. There's still a lot we have to learn about them. So I mentioned earlier that they have really big nostrils on the very tip of their nose. When I say very big, they're like this big around each nostril. So like you could definitely stick your whole finger up their nose very easily. You could probably stick something as big as a carrot in their nose. They would not like that, and they would definitely pull away from that and fight you on that account. But those large nostrils actually serve a very important purpose for them in the colder months, in the wintertime. It allows them to breathe in a lot of air really quickly and heat that air before it gets to their lungs. That helps to keep them warmer for a longer period of time. So they're not using a lot of body heat to keep that cold air warm in their lungs and as they use that oxygen. It also helps them intake more oxygen quickly. Living at a high elevation, the oxygen gets thinner as you go up in elevation. And so being able to breathe in a lot of air is going to get you more bang for your buck as you're trying to absorb oxygen into your body. They also have very large hooves. So their feet are like this big, very, very big hoofs. They are split into 2 toes. Each toe is about this big. And those toes are kind of spongy on the underside surface with a harder edge along the edge line. That helps them to really be able to climb and almost grab with their toes as they climb over big rocks. They are very, very agile. When San Diego Zoo first got them and built an exhibit for them at the zoo, I believe that was in the late 1970s, early 1980s, they put a 6-foot-high wall around their exhibit. Takin are only like 5'5" at the shoulder, or 4'5" at the shoulder. They felt 6 feet was good enough, and they quickly learned that that was not the case, that the Takin could jump from a standing position over that wall. So they are very athletic, very muscular, very big animals that can move surprisingly well. Let's talk a little bit about baby Takin. Baby Takin are, like I talked about tapirs the other day and how baby tapirs were one of my favorite animals because they're so cute. Baby Takin are right there almost with them. Baby Takin are adorable. I have a really cute video of baby Takin from when I worked with them at the LA Zoo that I'll be posting later today. But babies are born after a 7th-month gestation. That means the mom's pregnant for 7 months. She usually only has 1 kid. Twins are very, very rare. So 1 kid. The baby weighs between 11 and 15 pounds. So that's roughly like twice the weight of a baby human on the big end of the scale. And at 3 days old, it can run and keep up with its mom. So they are pretty agile right from the beginning. Which is important for them. They live in a very mountainous terrain. They're born typically in the springtime. That's when the herds have been living at lower elevations and they're on their way back up the mountain. So the baby needs to be able to climb and go with mom and go with the herd pretty quickly. So during their migration, they use kind of the same paths to go up and down throughout the mountains, throughout the different times of the year. And they can be found kind of higher altitudes during the summer months, so it's going to be a little cooler for them up there. As far as predators go out in the wild, most animals will not mess with a Takin. I've already talked about their horns. They're also very quick, so they can defend themselves very, very well. But occasionally a bear or some wolves may go after them. In some parts of their range, there are leopards, but that's very rare. Leopards are pretty endangered in most of their range, but that could be a potential. And in like 2 little spots, potentially some tigers. And then there's a wild dog species that lives in parts of Asia called a dhole, D-H-O-L-E. They kind of hunt in packs like a wolf. They could also go after the baby Takin or a sick or injured adult, for sure. They will kind of protect themselves, but they are also very quick to be able to move, and they can outmaneuver almost any kind of predator that would be coming after them on a steep hillside. So if they get to a steep spot, they keep on running up or down, whichever way they're going, and the predator would probably need to stop running. Because it wouldn't be able to navigate the rocks as easily as the Takin can. Takins are herbivores, so they eat plants. One of their favorite things to eat is right here with me today. This is bamboo. They love to eat bamboo. They will also eat evergreens, so things like pine trees or fir trees. They love to eat grass, especially up in the mountain pastures and some of the wildflowers that come along with that. And some of the herbs and smaller plants and shrubs as well. Scientists have identified over 120 different types of plants that takin eat. And as they move up and down the mountainside, they will sometimes poop through the seeds of those different plants, so they are important in helping the health of their ecosystem and the plants to continue to grow and live in many of their places that they live. Now, despite the fact that they are a plant eater, when we worked with them at the zoo, we never went in with the takin. If there was some sort of emergency where you had to go in with the takin, you still would not go in with the takin. You would maybe go in some sort of an emergency with multiple people, with very specialized equipment to try to protect you. You would probably try to interact with them more in a vehicle if possible. Now, there is a place in Ohio called the Wilds, and it's kind of a big drive-through zoo. And they have takin there, and some of the takin there live in a big open pasture area, and they approach their takin in a pickup truck, but it's really rare that the people get out of the truck when they're near the takin, or if they do so with one person kind of standing guard and the other person doing whatever they need to do very, very quickly. So even in a zoo setting, you have to be very, very cautious around this very big, very fast, and very well-equipped muscular animal that could definitely do some harm to you. Often in my time working with takin, as I would bring them into the barn so I could clean their exhibit, one or two or three of the adults would usually charge at the fence or the gate in the barn that separated me from them, and hit that full force with their head, and it would shake the entire barn. It was usually pretty intimidating. Definitely made me want to never be in the same space directly with the takin. So it is very important that those safety protocols were in place and followed. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the threats that takin face. So there are 4 subspecies of takin. 2 are listed as vulnerable, 2 are listed as endangered. Some scientists say that they should all be treated as different species rather than subspecies because there's enough genetically different between them. So that's still being kind of debated. Different populations of them are struggling more than others, and the different populations, although their ranges kind of get close to each other, they're kind of in separate areas. So their threats that they face are all pretty similar. The biggest being deforestation. So as takins really live in like a forested mountain environment, that's where a lot of big trees grow. That's where things like bamboo can grow. And that's where a lot of countries with huge populations like India and China, which are 2 of the 4 places they live, need to cut down the trees in order to make things for their very large populations. Some of that wood is sometimes cut and sold for places around the world, including the United States. And cutting down the forest causes lots of problems for lots of animals. In some parts of their range, they are also still hunted for their skins and also for their meat. Now, they are typically protected by the laws of those different countries, but the laws are not always known by the people who live in very remote and rural areas, very small town villages up in the high mountains. Maybe don't know about those laws, maybe don't care about those laws, and maybe just want to find something to eat. So it's very tough that those laws are ever enforced, but hunting is a problem for the takin. And the other big threat is habitat fragmentation. So what that means is, like, if there's a forest that the takin use and it goes up the mountain up to 12,000 feet, where there's some nice meadows during the summer, and down into a lower valley, say at like 3,000 feet or 4,000 feet for them to have for a winter range. If somebody builds a road through the middle of that at like 5,500 feet and then starts to build a city or a town there, or uses that as a place to base a lumber camp or a mining operation or anything like that, they've now interrupted the path the takin used to go up and down. And that causes a lot of stress on the animals, and the takin will usually avoid people They will usually avoid roadways. They are not very happy to cross a roadway. They don't want to get hit by a truck. So they will usually avoid roadways, and any other human big construction activities have caused problems for them in many parts of their range. And their last threat is competition with livestock. So especially up in some of the mountain grasslands where they love to eat in the summertime, there are sometimes people up there herding goats or sheep or cows, and competition with domestic animals is a big part of a problem for many animals across the planet. So with those, what are some things that are being done to hopefully help? Well, the country of Bhutan, which is a pretty interesting country, it's very small, and it's very kind of closed off to the outside world. They don't allow very many people to come and visit. They don't share a lot of information with other countries. They don't trade a lot with other countries. They're kind of little self-sufficient country, and they don't interact too much with the rest of the world. But the takin is their national animal, and they have put very strict protections in place. They also work very hard to try to make sure that those protections are followed in a lot of their lands, and really try to help mitigate any problems that the takin may face with people. Bhutan already protects about 50% of all of its land as a kind of national park setting where they allow nature to take its place, and they have a goal of making that 60% of their land protected. So they are doing some really amazing work to protect the animals that live in their country. Now, in some of those other countries where takin live, particularly China, many of the takin live in China. It has probably the highest number of takin living there. The takin like to eat bamboo, and so they live in areas where there's bamboo forest. And you may have thought, oh, what other animals eat bamboo? Giant pandas. And giant pandas also live in a lot of the same forest where the takin live. And so in places where they've protected pandas, takin are also often protected along with that as one of the species that China takes great pride in. There's also a species of monkey that lives in some of those nearby forests called a golden monkey, and it is also very protected in China. And so the takin kind of benefit from having more famous neighbors around who are protected and whose habitats are protected. So today for our special shout out, so this is kind of a different organization than we usually talk about. There's not somebody out there who's doing a lot of really amazing work to help takin specifically, but there's an organization called the Forest Stewardship Council. Their acronym is FSC. And they certify that any wood or paper are grown in a responsible way and sustainably harvested, so that forests that are used for wood, for paper, for toilet paper, are all grown in a very methodical way that doesn't hurt animals that may live in that forest, that they make sure that they leave wild corridors and wild spaces for the animals to still be able to move around. So the Forest Stewardship Council does really amazing work. They have a little logo that can be found on a lot of products that are wood or paper based, that has FSC and like a little pine tree kind of tree, and then a little green check mark. I'll be posting their logo up on the pages later today, but please look for that if you're ever buying lumber to use for like a home improvement project, or if you're buying paper to use at home to print things from your printer, or even toilet paper. Any paper products, you can look for a FSC certified product that will help out forests around the world. Believe it or not, a lot of the forests that are in danger around the world go to supply products that we consume in the United States. Things like toilet paper, paper plates, lots of wood, all comes from forests in other countries. So we're a part of the problem unless we are consuming things at a more responsible rate. I want to just end talking a little bit about my experience in working with takins and what I've seen with takins in different zoos. So when I was a zookeeper at the Los Angeles Zoo, I helped take care of our Sichuan takin herd. During that time, we did have a couple of different babies. The babies were always a little shy around me because I was not their main keeper. When I was a zookeeper, I was cross-trained to work with about 45 different species. So I would kind of bounce around and fill in when other people were on vacation, if someone called in sick, or if it was somebody's day off. So the babies never really knew me very well and were always a little more shy around me than they were their main keeper. But I loved working with the baby takin. They're super adorable. They're kind of all feisty personalities. Their moms were extremely protective. When there was a baby around and I'd bring them into the barn to feed them while I cleaned their exhibit, the moms would always charge up and hit the barn door really hard to let me know that they were there, that they were the boss, that they were protecting their baby. It definitely scared me. Their dad, though, was amazing. So he was huge. He would stand up on the edge of the barn and put his front feet up high, like as high as my head. And then his nose would be way up here. We had a little like target pole that we were training him to move different ways. That's how we got him to go onto the scale so we could weigh him and to hold still if we had to do any other medical procedures. So I would do a little bit of that with him. He's the one who trusted me the most. And he would let me hand feed him carrots. And so although he was the biggest of all the takin, he was the one who I got to work with the most, always through a protected barrier. They are big. They can be very dangerous animals. But I really, really loved working with takin. I have some fun videos that I'll put up later from my experience as their zookeeper and in my experience working with them. I have also seen 3 of the 4 species of takin in zoos. Now to do that, you have to go outside the United States. In the US, we only have 1 subspecies, and that is the Sichuan takin. The US has made agreements with the countries who have takin occurring naturally that we would help support the Sichuan takin population. Likewise, other countries, so countries in Europe, work mostly with Mishmi takin, which are kind of the littler ones, and also the golden takin are in some of the bigger zoos in Europe. So when I went to the Berlin Tierpark Zoo in East Berlin, I was able to see 3 subspecies of takin all in one day at that zoo, and I was amazed to be able to compare and contrast how they looked with each other. I was very familiar with Sichuan takin at that point, but had never seen the golden takin or the Mishmi takin, and I was quite surprised to be able to see what they looked like and how they behaved. I have never seen a Bhutan takin, which is the 4th species. To my knowledge, they only live in their natural habitat, and the only captive Bhutan takin are in the country of Bhutan. So pretty rare to see those. I do hope one day to be able to travel to that region of Asia and hopefully see some wild takin. It's kind of one of my bucket list items, and someday I hope to make it happen. But that's what I have to share with you today in today's Critter Chat about takin. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared. I hope you check in later on Facebook or Instagram to see some of the other footage and information I'll share. And I'll upload this whole video on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So if you only caught part of this, you can tune in later and watch the whole episode. Until tomorrow, take care of yourself, be happy, be healthy, have fun. We'll see you then. Oh, and feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and share any information on any of the Zoo Nerd profiles. Thanks. See you tomorrow.